The pack elder looked at my file and said the words I had been dreading my entire adult life. The condition is confirmed. Irreversible. You will never carry wolf pups. I was 25 years old. I was standing in the middle of the Grave-Ass Pack's formal healer hall, in a white clinical room that smelled like antiseptic and ceremony, and I felt the floor move under me in the specific way it moves when you have been waiting for bad news and the bad news has finally stopped waiting. I did not cry, not because I was strong, because I was in shock, because crying requires a certain kind of presence in your body, and I had just left mine. What I did was nod. I nodded at the elder healer. I collected my file. I walked out into the corridor where my mother was waiting. She took one look at my face and understood. And then I heard something I was not supposed to hear, because I had not walked far enough away. I heard the elder healer say, to her assistant, in the quiet voice of someone who believed the conversation was private. Such a shame. She has strong bloodlines otherwise. But the Arveth king will never accept a barren queen. She might as well cross herself off the candidate list entirely. The candidate list. The formal mate candidate list for the Alpha King of the Arveth Reach. The list my mother had entered my name on 3 weeks ago without telling me. Without telling me. I stood in that corridor with my file in my hands and my mother's hand on my arm, and I felt two things at the same time. The grief of a diagnosis I had just received, and a cold, clarifying fury of a woman who has just learned that her mother has been sending her name to a king as if she were a product on a shelf. What I did not know, what neither of us knew, standing in that clinical corridor, was that the Alpha King of the Arveth Reach had already seen my name, and had already made a decision, just not the one anyone expected. Like the video right now. Hit that subscribe button and drop in the comments where you're watching from. Because I have people watching from every corner of this world, and this story is going to take you somewhere you did not expect to end up today. Come with me. Her name was Isavel Cren, and the first thing you needed to know about Isavel was that she had spent 25 years being defined by what she wasn't. Not the strongest wolf in the Grave-Ass Pack. Not the most politically connected. Not the daughter with the commanding presence, or the strategic ambition, or the gift for navigating the ranked wolves' social landscape. She was the quiet one. The one who kept records and organized systems, and had a startling gift for finding the specific piece of information that a situation needed, which was valuable enough that people relied on it, but not remarkable enough that people thought to ask how she did it. She was the archivist's assistant. Not the archivist. That was a formal rank, held by a wolf named Orvin who had been in the position for 15 years and who was, by every measure, competent and methodical. But Isavel had been his assistant for 4 years, and in those 4 years the archive had been reorganized twice, the cross-referencing system had been rebuilt, and the response time for information requests from the pack administration had dropped by 60%. Nobody had formally noticed this. Orvin had noticed. He had told her, privately, that she was the best archivist the Grave-Ass Pack had not officially recognized. This was the best professional compliment she had received. She had said thank you and organized another section. The infertility she had known about since she was 20. Not the formal diagnosis, that had been the clinical confirmation, the official record. But the knowing. The particular way her body had signaled, over years, that certain things were not going to work the way they worked for other wolves. She had brought it to the healer at 20, been told it was probably hormonal and might resolve, and had spent 5 years holding the possibility that it might resolve before the formal confirmation that it would not. She had managed this the way she managed most things, quietly, carefully, with the specific competence of someone who understood that some things could not be organized into a better shape and simply had to be carried. She had not told her mother. This was, she understood in retrospect, the mistake that led to the corridor moment. Her mother, Isavel Cren, was a woman of considerable social ambition on behalf of her daughters. Not malicious ambition. The specific, genuine ambition of a mother who had grown up mid-tier in a pack where rank mattered and had decided, early, that her children were going to move upward in ways she had not been able to. She had managed this for Isavel's older sister Kes through a strategic relationship with a beta-ranked family. She had been managing it for Isavel through a series of approaches to eligible wolves that Isavel had been gently deflecting for 3 years. The candidate list was the most significant escalation of the managing. The Alpha King of the Arveth Reach, a man named Cavryn Arveth, 34 years old, who had been on the throne for 8 years without taking a mate, had opened a formal mate selection process. This was not unusual in wolf culture. Formal processes for sovereign mates had history and structure and specific protocols. It was, in theory, a dignified and ordered way for an eligible king to identify a compatible match. In practice, it was also a system that families with social ambition treated as an opportunity. Ivan had submitted Isavel's name, without telling her, using documentation that required only family authorization, not the candidate's own signature. This was, technically, within the protocol's rules. This did not make it acceptable. Isavel stood in the corridor and understood that her mother had entered her in a competition she had not agreed to enter, for a position she had not sought, and that the diagnosis she had just received made her technically ineligible under the formal selection criteria that the Arveth Reach had published. She went home. She did not speak to her mother in the car. She sat in her apartment that evening and made 2 lists. The first list was the things she needed to do to formally withdraw her name from the candidate process. The documentation, the timeline, the specific office to contact. The second list was the things she felt about what had happened, which she was going to sit with for exactly 1 evening before putting them in their proper place and moving forward. The second list was long. She sat with it for the full evening, as promised. Then she folded it, metaphorically, and put it down. She started the withdrawal process the following morning. She submitted the formal request to the Arveth Administrative Office, the specific department handling the candidate process, and went to work and organized a section of the archive, and came home and made dinner and called Kes, who said the right things in the way that Kes did, and went to bed. She did not know that the withdrawal request had been flagged. Not blocked. Flagged. Sent to a specific desk with a specific person's attention note attached. The specific person being Cavryn Arveth himself. She did not know this until the letter arrived. The letter came on a Thursday. It was on Arveth administrative paper, with the Arveth seal, and it was addressed to Isavel Cren in handwriting that was not an administrative assistant's. She opened it at her kitchen table before work. It said, "Your withdrawal request has been received. Before it is processed, I would like to request a brief meeting. Not as part of the formal candidate process. That process is, as you note, no longer applicable to your situation. As a personal request, and one that I am not in a position to explain fully in writing. I ask for 1 hour of your time. The meeting can be at a location of your choosing, in your territory, on a date that suits your schedule. No obligation to the selection process is implied or intended. CA." She read it twice. Then she read it a third time. Then she set it down and looked at the kitchen wall and thought about what kind of person writes to a candidate withdrawing from a formal process to request a personal meeting and cannot explain why in writing. She thought about the administrative logic of a flagging system that sent withdrawal requests to the attention of the king specifically. She thought about the specific words, not as part of the formal candidate process. She wrote back. She wrote the shortest response available that was honest. "The Grave-Ass Pack Archive Office, first floor conference room, Tuesday at 10. I have to be back to work by 11:30. She sent it. She did not know what she was doing. She was going to find out. She found out on a Tuesday at 10 in the morning, when Cavryn Arveth arrived at the Grave-Ass Pack Archive Office's first floor conference room with one member of his administrative staff and the specific quality of presence that people who hold large territories tended to have. She had expected formidable. He was, but not in the way she had built in her head from the formal portraits and the administrative correspondence and the political record. He was present, That was the word. Fully, completely present in the room he was in, without the performed presence of someone who needed you to register their significance. His significance was simply there, atmospheric rather than performed, and he had, she sensed, stopped noticing it a long time ago. He was tall, with the kind of dark-haired, precise-featured face that photographs flattened and reality gave more dimension to. He was 34 and looked it in the way that meant he had been somewhere and done something with the time rather than simply aged through it. He looked at her when he entered. She looked at him. They stood across the conference table and she said, "Sit down. I'll get coffee if you need it. I have until 11:30. He sat. He did not need coffee. She sat across from him. "You flagged my withdrawal," she said. "Not a question." "Yes," he said. "Why?" He looked at the table for a moment, then at her. "I'd like to tell you something that is not in the public record of the selection process," he said. "And I need to know that it will remain between us before I tell you." She looked at him steadily. "I'm an archivist. Confidential information is my professional baseline." Something in his expression, the specific flicker she would come to recognize as the one that happened when she said something he hadn't expected. "The formal selection process," he said carefully, "is not what it appears." She waited. "The process was established 8 years ago," he said. "It was not established by me. It was established by the Council of Senior Advisors, who had, and continue to have, specific expectations about who the Arveth King should mate with. Specific criteria: bloodline compatibility, political alliance value, fertility record, ranked standing." He paused. "I have been managing the existence of this process for 8 years without formally closing it, because closing it formally would require either producing a mate on the council's terms or explaining why I was not going to do so." She looked at him. "And you're not going to," she said. "No," he said. "I am not. Because the terms are. Because the terms are a political instrument," he said. "Not a genuine mate selection framework. They were designed by people who understand mate bonds as political alliances rather than as what they actually are." He paused. "I am telling you this because when your name appeared on the list 3 weeks ago, something happened that I have not experienced with any other candidate in 8 years of watching names go through this process." She was very still. "What happened?" she said. "I don't know how to describe it with precision," he said. "I am not someone who lacks precision generally. But this specific thing, the moment I read your file, and then your name, and then the subsection of your file that contained your professional history," he paused. Something shifted. Something that was nothing like reading an administrative document. She breathed. "You felt the bond," she said. He held her gaze. "I don't know," he said. "I felt something. I have been trying to establish whether that something is what it might be for 3 weeks. By requesting a meeting," she said. "Yes." She sat with this for a moment. "You read my file," she said. "The full file." "Yes." "Then you know about the condition," she said. "Yes." "And you know that the condition makes me formally ineligible under your council's criteria." "Yes," he said again. "So the meeting is," she stopped, "reorganized. The meeting is separate from the candidate process, which is the process your council designed, and which you have been managing for 8 years, and which you are not going to comply with on their terms." "Yes," he said. "And you're here because..." "Because I wanted to know," he said simply, "if what I felt reading your name was real. Because it is the first time in 8 years that anything in the process felt real. And I was not willing to let you withdraw before I understood what I was losing if you did." The conference room was quiet. From the hallway outside came the sound of the archives, ordinary morning, footsteps, the quiet sound of documents, Orvin's voice giving someone direction. She looked at the man across from her. "I'm going to ask you something directly," she said. "Yes." "Did you feel it just now, when you walked into this room?" He held her gaze. "Yes," he said, and his voice had changed, lost the precise administrative quality, become something more direct. "Yes, even more clearly than the file." She breathed. She was perceptive. She had been perceptive her entire life, in the specific way of people who worked with information and had learned to read what it actually said versus what it presented. She looked at him, and she found no false note, no performance, no managed version of an answer designed to produce a specific outcome. Just a man sitting in a conference room telling the truth about something he hadn't expected to be true. The condition, she said carefully. Do you understand what it means? That you cannot carry pups, he said. Yes. And your counsel, she said. Their criteria are not the criteria I intend to use, he said. But they're the criteria that govern your public position, she said. Your political structure. The expectations of the packs within your reach. She looked at him steadily. Taking a mate who cannot produce heirs is not a personal choice for an Alpha King. It's a political event. It changes things. It creates opposition. It creates a succession question that doesn't have a biological answer. I know, he said. Do you? She said. I have been managing the political implications of not having a mate for 8 years, he said. I understand, with some specificity, what the political structure of the Arveth Reach thinks about my personal decisions. He paused. I did not come here to manage the politics. I came here to understand what happened when I read your name. She sat with this. What did you find out? She asked. Now that you're here. He looked at her directly. That it's real, he said. Whatever it is. It's real. She looked at her hands. I need time, she said. Yes, he said. She stopped. I received a diagnosis 3 days ago that I have been emotionally managing while simultaneously navigating the discovery that my mother entered my name in a formal process without my consent. And now I am sitting across from the Alpha King of a significant reach who is telling me that something he felt reading my administrative file is real. She paused. I need time. I know, he said. How much time do you need from me? She said. Before you have to either process the withdrawal or... The withdrawal can wait as long as you need, he said. There is no deadline from my end. The formal process is, functionally, mine to manage. I can manage the timeline. She nodded slowly. Don't send it through formal channels, she said. If you want to continue this conversation, talk to me directly, not through administrative offices. He looked at her. How? He said. She pulled a card from her folder, the archive's contact card, standard, and wrote her personal number on the back. She slid it across the table. 11:30, she said, and stood up. He stood when she did. Isavel, he said. Her first name. She registered it. She looked at him. Thank you, he said, for coming. You wrote a letter that was genuinely impossible to not respond to, she said. I want you to know that. Something in his expression, the flicker again. She went back to the archive. He called the following Monday. She was in the middle of a cross-referencing task, and she answered because she had said direct communication, and that was what direct communication meant. They talked for 40 minutes. Not about the formal process. Not about the bond, exactly. About the work. He had questions about the archive restructuring that he had read in her file's professional history, which turned out to be genuine professional curiosity rather than a conversational strategy, because he ran an administrative structure considerably larger than a single pack archive, and the organizational problems were adjacent. She answered the questions. He asked follow-ups. She noticed, toward the end of the 40 minutes, that the conversation had moved from archive logistics to a general discussion of how information systems failed their users and what made some designs intuitive and others obstructive, and that she had said 3 things she had not expected to say and meant all of them. He called the following Thursday. This time they talked for an hour and 20 minutes, which meant she burned her lunch break and ate at her desk afterward, which was a new development in her professional routine. On the third call, she asked him something she had been holding. The council, she said. The advisors who designed the process. If this became something formal, what would they do? A pause. They would object, he said. Formally and with significant political force. How significant? Significant enough to require navigating, he said. Not enough to be insurmountable, but significant. She breathed. And you're prepared for that. I've been preparing for it for 8 years, he said. How, she said. By running the Arveth Reach well enough that my political position is strong enough to withstand the council's objection, he said. 8 years of competent governance is specifically useful for this kind of situation. She looked at the ceiling. You've been preparing for 8 years for the possibility of choosing someone the council didn't approve of, she said. Not specifically, he said. Generally. I have been preparing for the possibility of making the right decision for the Reach rather than the politically comfortable one. This falls under that preparation. She was quiet. Cavryn, she said. His first name. She felt him register it the way she had registered hers. Yes. I'm going to tell you something that I haven't told anyone except my sister, she said. About the condition. Okay, he said. I've been managing the possibility of it since I was 20, she said. The formal confirmation 3 days ago was not a surprise. It was the closing of a door I had been keeping slightly open for 5 years. She paused. I have made peace with it. I want you to know that I'm not. I'm not someone who is carrying active grief about this. I have had 5 years. The grief was 5 years ago. Another pause. But it is a real thing. It shapes what my life looks like. And if we were to, she stopped. Yes, he said quietly. It would shape yours too, she said. In ways that are not small. I know, he said. And your? I am telling you, he said, with the same specificity I bring to administrative decisions, that the condition is not the defining variable for me. The defining variable is the person. And the person, from the file and from the calls and from the 11:30 conference room, is someone I would like to know properly before anything else is decided. She held the phone. Okay, she said. Okay, he said. Come back, she said. Not for a formal visit. Not with your staff. Come back for a week and be in the territory and let me know if what you felt in the conference room is the kind of thing that holds up when the context is ordinary. A pause. When, he said. 2 weeks, she said. I have a project finishing in 2 weeks. After that. 2 weeks, he confirmed. He came back on a Thursday. He stayed in the PAC's guest accommodation, which was comfortable but not palatial, which was appropriate. He had, as she had asked, not brought his administrative staff. He had the 2 security members who were apparently non-negotiable, but they maintained the kind of distance that suggested they had been doing this long enough to know when to be invisible. She met him in the morning. Not with plans, exactly. With a day. She took him to the archive. She was not going to pretend her work didn't exist or that it wasn't a central part of who she was. He spent 2 hours in the archive, which she had not expected, reading things, asking questions, displaying genuine interest in the cross-referencing system she had built and the specific logic of why documents needed to be findable in multiple ways simultaneously. She showed him the section she was currently reorganizing. He understood immediately why the previous system had failed. She found this, unexpectedly, with the specific quality of unexpectedness that comes when something you weren't looking for arrives, enormously satisfying. They walked in the afternoon. Not on a formal path, on the ordinary routes she used for thinking, the ones that went through the edges of the PAC territory where the trees started and the compound noise faded. He matched her pace without making a point of it. He was quiet in the specific way of someone comfortable with silence, which was the quality she valued most in company. She told him about the archive, about Orvin and the 4 years of gradual rebuilding and the specific satisfaction of a system that finally worked. He told her about the Arveth administrative structure, the complexity of managing 8 constituent PACs under a single sovereignty, the specific challenges of maintaining consistent governance across territories with different local cultures and different relationships to authority. She asked questions that were precise. He gave answers that were precise. In the evening, they ate at a place she liked in the PAC town, small, unpretentious, with food that was genuinely good in the specific way that required no theater to be good. He ate with the same quality he brought to everything else, without ceremony, as if the food's actual quality was what mattered rather than its context. On the third day of the week, something shifted, not dramatically, in the way that shifts happened when things were real rather than arranged. They were in the middle of a conversation about information governance, a tangential topic that had somehow arrived from a discussion about the pack's historical records, and he said something that was exactly right. Not agreeable right. True right. The specific quality of being right that you didn't hear often because most people optimized for agreement rather than accuracy. She stopped. She looked at him. He looked at her. What? He said. You meant that, she said. Yes, he said. You weren't adjusting for what I wanted to hear, she said. No, he said. I wasn't. She looked at him for a moment. The bond, she said. Yes, he said. I can feel it, she said. I've been feeling it since the conference room. I've been being careful about acknowledging it. Why, he said. Because the context is, because my mother submitted my name without telling me, and I was formally rejected from a process I never agreed to enter. And the Alpha King of the Arveth Reach wrote me a letter and asked for a meeting, and I said yes, and I don't always know whether I'm responding to what I feel or responding to the situation. She paused. I have been trying to separate those things. Can you? He said. She thought about it honestly. Less and less, she said. He was quiet for a moment. Isavel, he said. Yes. The condition, he said. I want to ask you something about it. Not about whether it changes things for me. I've told you where I stand on that. But about how you understand it. She waited. Do you believe the healer's assessment is complete? He said. Have you sought a second opinion? She looked at him. Why would I? She stopped. Something in his expression. The Arveth Reach has 3 healers whose specialty is specifically this area of wolf medicine, he said carefully. Not general healers. Specialists. People whose entire professional practice is the specific biological systems that determine this particular condition. He paused. I'm not saying the grave-assed healer was wrong. I'm saying that the grave-assed healer is a general practitioner, and the specific condition you've been diagnosed with has. There is significant complexity in this area. Diagnoses have been. There have been cases. Of misdiagnosis, she said quietly. Of incomplete assessment, he said. The distinction matters. Not misdiagnosis in the sense of carelessness. Incomplete in the sense that general practitioners sometimes lack the specialized tools to see the full picture. She held this. You looked into it, she said. After the file. Yes, he said. I'm not managing the condition for you. I'm not telling you to hope for a different outcome. I'm telling you that the assessment you have may not be the only possible assessment, and that you deserve a complete picture before accepting an incomplete one. She looked at her hands. You did this for a wolf you had never met, she said, before we'd spoken once. I did it because the file told me things about you that made me want to be thorough on your behalf, he said simply. She breathed. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I'm asking, he said. She thought about it for 2 weeks. Not idly. She researched. She was an archivist. Research was her native language. She found the literature on wolf fertility assessment, the specific, specialized body of knowledge that general practice healers had access to, and that specialist practitioners had built beyond. She found 3 documented cases in the Arveth Reach's own medical archive, a resource she accessed through the Arveth administrative connection she now had, formally, through the personal communication she'd been having with their king, of wolves who had received similar diagnoses from general practitioners and who, upon specialist assessment, had received different and more complete pictures. Different pictures did not always mean wrong diagnoses, but sometimes they did. She made an appointment with the lead specialist healer at the Arveth Reach's Medical Research Center. She went on a Friday, alone, because this was her body and her decision, and she was not going to bring someone else into the physical reality of a medical appointment as if she needed support to withstand information. She sat in the specialist's office, a woman named Prevel who had the specific quality of a person who knew a great deal about a specific thing and did not waste your time pretending otherwise. Prevel conducted the assessment over 3 hours. Not one test. 7. each measuring a different component of the biological system that the general practitioner's single assessment had evaluated as a single, failed whole. Preble reviewed the results for 30 minutes while Isavel sat in the waiting area with a magazine she did not read. Then Preble came back and looked at her, not at the document, at her, and said, "The original assessment identified a real condition. What it did not identify is that the condition is of a type that responds to treatment. Not with certainty. I want to be honest with you about the success rates, which are meaningful but not guaranteed. But your case is not the irreversible closure you were given. You were given a general diagnosis that was applied without the tools to see the full picture." Isavel sat in the waiting room chair. She breathed. "What does treatment look like?" she said. Preble told her. "A protocol. 12 months. Specific interventions at specific intervals. The success rate in cases with her specific biological profile, not the general category, the specific subprofile, was 68%. Not a guarantee. 68% was not 100%. But 68% was not zero. Zero was what she had been carrying for 5 years. She drove home. She sat in her apartment. She called Kes. She told her everything. Kes was quiet for a long time. And then she said, "Who found the specialists? Who told you the original assessment might be incomplete?" Isavel was quiet. "Someone who looked into it on my behalf," she said, "before we'd met. Because the file told him things about me." Another pause. "A file," Kes said. "Yes." "And this someone?" Kes said carefully. "Yes," Isavel said. "It's him." The silence on the line had a different quality after that. "Are you all right?" Kes said. "I'm going to be," Isavel said. "I think I'm going to be." She called Cavryn that evening. He answered immediately. She told him what the specialist had said. The whole of it, the 7 tests and the specific profile and the 68% and the 12-month protocol and what it meant and what it didn't mean. He was quiet while she told it. When she finished, he said, "What do you want to do?" "The protocol," she said. "I want to do the protocol." "Okay," he said. "Cavryn." "Yes." "You did this," she said. "You found the specialists. You made it possible for me to know that there was more to see." She paused. "Before you even knew me. Before we had spoken once. I read a file that told me things," he said quietly. "I wanted to be thorough." "Why?" she said. "Why did you care enough to be thorough for a stranger?" A long pause. "Because the bond was real," he said. "From the moment I read your name. And the bond told me that whoever you were, you deserve to have complete information about your own life." He paused. "And I was in a position to find it." She was quiet for a moment. She felt it. The bond, which had been building since the conference room and the calls and the week and the conversation about information governance. The thing she had been careful about acknowledging and was done being careful about. "I'm going to do the protocol," she said. "And I'm going to do it at the Arveth Specialist Center, if they'll take me as a patient, because Preble is the most capable person in this area that I've encountered, and I trust her." "They'll take you," he said. "I'll make sure. And I'm going to come to the Arveth Reach," she said. "Not for the protocol only." She stopped. He said. "For the thing that happens after everything we've been talking about," she said. "If you're still." "Yes," he said, without waiting for the sentence to finish. "Yes, completely." She breathed. "I need one more thing from you," she said. "Yes." "The council," she said. "The advisors. Whatever they're going to do when they understand what you're choosing. I need to not be the thing that breaks your governance. I need to not be the problem that costs the Reach its stability." "You won't be," he said. "How do you know?" "Because I have been preparing for 8 years," he said. "And because the Reach has been governed well enough that my political position can hold the weight of this decision. And because the council's objection, when it comes, is going to be answered by the same thing it has always been answered by when people question my decisions. Evidence that the decision is right." She thought about the word evidence. She was an archivist. She understood the weight of evidence. "I'm going to need documentation," she said, "of the specialist assessment, of the protocol, of the specific biological profile. If the counsel is going to object, you need the counter-argument in writing, and it needs to be complete. He was quiet for a moment. You're going to help me build the case, he said. I build cases for a living, she said. It's what I do. The flicker, she was certain, was in his voice when he said, yes. I'm aware. She moved to the Arveth Reach in the spring. Not immediately. There were things to do first. The archive section to finish. Orvin to tell, which was a conversation that ended with Orvin being pragmatic, and then, separately, quite emotional in the specific way that a 15-year career mentor was emotional when the person they'd invested in was leaving for something significant. She packed the things that were hers. She told her mother. Yvonne received the news with the complicated expression of a woman who had submitted her daughter's name to a royal mate candidate process as a social strategy and had not remotely anticipated this specific outcome. He's choosing you, her mother said. Despite nothing, Isavel said. He's choosing me. Specifically, her mother sat with this. I'm sorry, she said finally. About the list. About not telling you. I know, Isavel said. I have been more angry about it than I've shown. But the outcome was, she paused. The outcome was not what either of us expected, and it happened to lead somewhere real. She looked at her mother. Don't do it again. For Kes or anyone else. Ask first. Yes, her mother said, and looked at her daughter with the specific expression of someone understanding that the child they had been managing has become the person who manages themselves. The council's objection came in the third month. It was formal, structured, and politically significant. It cited the fertility criteria. It cited the political precedent of an alpha king with no biological heirs and the succession instability it created. It cited 3 historical cases from the Arveth Reach's own record in which succession disputes had destabilized territories. It was, Isavel had to admit when she read it, well constructed. She sat at her desk in the Arveth Administrative Center. She had been given a position in the records and information management structure, which was exactly where she should have been, and she read the council's document from beginning to end. Then she started writing the response. Not Cavryn's response. She was not going to write his arguments for him. But the counter-documentation. The specific, evidence-based construction that put the council's 3 historical cases alongside the 3 counter cases that the Arveth historical record also contained, but that the council had chosen not to cite. That placed the specialist healer's assessment and the treatment protocol and the 68% success rate alongside the council's fertility criteria. That documented, with specificity, the nature of the bond, not romantically, not performatively, but with the precision of historical records that described what mate bonds between alpha kings and their chosen partners had produced in terms of governance stability, not genetic succession. It took her 4 days. When it was done, she brought it to Cavryn. He read it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he looked at her. You've been building this since the phone calls, he said. I've been building it since the conference room, she said. An archivist's instinct. You always need the counter-document. He looked at her with the expression she had cataloged over months. The one that was not the political alpha, but the man underneath. The one that appeared when she said the thing he hadn't expected, and it was exactly right. Isavel, he said. Yes. I want to ask you something, he said. And I want an honest answer. You always get honest answers, she said. You'd know if you weren't. The corner of his mouth moved. Are you doing this because you want to, he said, or because you feel like the political situation requires it of you? She looked at him. I'm doing this, she said, because the council made a case using incomplete evidence. And I am physically incapable of sitting in the presence of incomplete evidence without completing it. She paused. The fact that it also serves the political situation we're in is, she stopped. Is what, he said. Is not a coincidence, she said. But it's also not the reason. He held her gaze. The protocol, he said. 6 months in. How is it going? She breathed. Preval says the markers are moving in the right direction. she said carefully. We won't know the full outcome for another 6 months. But the markers are moving in the right direction. He nodded slowly. And regardless of the outcome, he said. Regardless of the outcome, she confirmed. This is where I am. This is the choice I'm making. He set the counter document down. He crossed to where she was standing. He was not a demonstrative man. She had come to understand this about him, that his feeling was in his attention and his honesty and the specific, complete quality of his presence when he was with her, rather than in the performed expressions of it. He put his hand on her face. You, he said, specifically, regardless of anything else. He paused. I want you to know that. She put her hand over his. I know, she said. That's why I came. The formal mate bond recognition happened in the summer. Not small. They had discussed small, and she had told him honestly that she did not need large, and he had told her that the political reality required that the formal recognition be visible enough to constitute the council's clear answer. She had understood. So it was visible. The 8 constituent packs of the Arveth reach. The elder seat representatives. The senior administrative community. 500 people in the formal hall, which was old stone and vaulted ceilings and the specific, accumulated weight of 4 centuries of significant events. She stood in the center of it in a dress that was not white. She was not a white dress person. She had been clear about this. In a deep blue that was the color of the archive's oldest binding cloth, which Kess had pointed out was extremely on brand, and which Isavel had agreed was probably not a coincidence. Cavryn stood across from her. He looked at her with the expression, the one that wasn't the king's public face but the man underneath. Both present at once. The public and the private, the formal recognition and the 11:30 conference room. Fennec. No, not Fennec. The Arveth elder whose name was Prael, said the words. Cavryn said his. Isavel said hers. And in the moment of silence after, when the hall held its breath, the council member who had been most vocal in the formal objection, an older wolf named Sorn who had been on the council for 20 years, looked at the woman in the deep blue dress and thought, visibly, whatever he thought. She met his gaze. She did not look away. He looked down at the documentation folder on the table in front of him, the counter document, which had been formally submitted to the elder seat review before the recognition ceremony, as per the protocol she had established with Prael. He was reading her work. Let him, she thought. It was thorough. The protocol completed in the fall. Preble's appointment was on a Wednesday. Isavel sat in the waiting room with the same magazine she had not read on the first visit. Cavryn sat beside her. He had not asked to come. She had asked him. He had come. Preble came back from the review. She looked at both of them. She said, the treatment was successful. The markers are all in the normal range. There are no guarantees about outcomes. I want to be clear about that. I am always clear about that. But the biological picture has changed. What was previously assessed as irreversible was reversed by the protocol. The waiting room was quiet. Cavryn took her hand. She looked at their hands. She thought about a healer's office 2 years ago, where an elder had looked at the document rather than her face. She thought about a corridor where she had overheard the words Baron Queen. She thought about a letter on Arveth administrative paper with a personal note on the bottom. She thought about an 11:30 conference room and a man who told her the truth about something he had not expected to be true. She was not going to cry. She was not in shock this time. She was present, fully, completely, in her own body, in the waiting room, with her hand in his. 68%, she said quietly. Preble smiled. 68%. The Queen title came later. Not immediately. The formal investiture was its own process, with its own protocols and its own political requirements, and she navigated all of it with the same methodical precision she had brought to the archive and the counter document and the protocol. Sorn, the council member, came to her 6 months after the recognition. He sat across from her, in the administrative center, not a conference room, her regular working space, and said, with the specific difficulty of a proud man making himself say something he had been resisting, The counter-document was thorough. "Thank you," she said. "I do not agree with all of your conclusions," he said. "I know," she said. "I read your response document. Your argument about succession precedent is based on a narrower definition of succession than the historical record supports. I noted the specific records in the counter-document." He looked at her. "You did," he said. "I'm an archivist," she said. "I don't leave gaps in documentation." He was quiet for a moment. "The reach is well governed," he said finally. "It has been for 8 years. The governance has not been weakened by your presence." He paused. "I wanted to say that to you directly." She looked at him. "Thank you," she said again, and meant it this time in a different register. He nodded. He left. She went back to the document she had been working on. In the spring, 2 years after the protocol, Preble called with the outcome she had not permitted herself to fully hope for. She sat down when she received the call. She sat very still for a long time after it ended. Then she walked to Cavryn's office. He looked up from his desk. He registered her face. He stood. She crossed the room. She put the phone in his hand with the call record visible. He read it. He set the phone down carefully. He looked at her. "Isavel," he said. "Yes," she said. And he held her the way he had been holding things for 8 years, completely, without reservation, with the full attention of someone who understood the weight of what they were holding. There is something about this story that I want to be careful about. Because it would be easy, it would be very easy, to hear it and take from it the message that the infertility was a problem and the cure was the solution. That is not the message. The message is about incomplete information. Isavel received a diagnosis, a real one, given in good faith by a general practitioner with the tools she had. The diagnosis was not fabricated. It was not a conspiracy. It was the honest conclusion of an honest assessment that happened to be an incomplete assessment. And for 5 years, she carried the incomplete version as if it were the whole. Not because she was weak or passive. Because she had no reason, with the information available to her, to think the assessment was anything other than final. What changed was not her condition. What changed was the information available to her. A man she had not met read her file and thought, "This person deserves to know if there is more to see." Not because he had romantic intentions. Not because he wanted something from her. Because he read between the lines of a professional record and understood, with the instinct of someone who had spent 8 years making decisions based on thorough information, that a general practitioner's assessment was a general practitioner's assessment. And he was in a position to find out if there was more. So he found out, and gave what he found to her, with no guarantee about what she would do with it, with no condition attached, with the simple understanding that complete information was something she deserved to have about her own life. That is the lesson. Not that every diagnosis is wrong. Not that hope overcomes all things. But that incomplete information is not the same as truth. And that the people who take the time to find out if there is more, who look at your situation with the thoroughness that you deserve and bring you what they find, those people are among the rarest and most valuable things in the world. Find them and be them for someone else. You stayed all the way through. You were there for the clinic and the corridor and the letter on Arveth administrative paper. You were there for the conference room and the protocol and the counter document and the October call from Preble. You felt it. Not just the romance. The deeper thing underneath it. The thing about being seen completely. About someone looking at your situation with more thoroughness than you had access to on your own. About what it means to have someone say, "I think there is more here to see. Let me find it for you." That is what this story was about. And this channel, every week, is about that. About looking closer. About not accepting the first version of something as the only version. About the extraordinary things that happen when you take the time to be thorough on behalf of someone else. If this story gave you something today, I need you to do something right now. Hit that subscribe button. Don't think about it. Don't save it for later. Right now? Because every week, we come back here with another story. Another truth. Another hour of something that finds the real thing underneath the presented version. This channel is for the people who know that the most important things in life are in the details. In the file. In the question underneath the question. In the specialist your general practitioner didn't tell you existed. Subscribe. Turn on the bell. Share this with someone who is carrying an incomplete diagnosis about themselves, about their worth, about what they deserve. Tell them, there might be more to see. Tell them, find someone who will look. And drop in the comments where you're watching from. Because you were here today, you stayed through every word. And the people who stay until the end, the ones who refuse to stop at the surface version of things, those are exactly who we are here for. See you next week. Don't miss it.